When my brother was released from state prison, when he was 23 years old, I went and picked him up from the Greyhound station. I hadn't seen my brother in 4 years. I was so excited. I took my friends with me, and when I saw him, I was very disturbed. He had been released in boxers and flip-flops and a white undershirt. And I sort of looked around, is this sort of, thinking, is this some sort of joke? And he had these dark sunglasses on, and his whole posture was completely different from the brother that I remembered going inside. So I remember, putting him in the front seat and asking, Monte, are you okay? Are you okay? He was sort of hunched over, super quiet. And he said, yes, I'm fine. And he was sort of tight-mouthed. And when we got to the house, my mother said, she kind of pulled me aside. She said, something's wrong with my son. I said, no, nothing's wrong. He just got 4 years of prison. It's going to take some time for him to acclimate. 5 days in, my brother was completely psychotic. He was, completely out of his mind, and we did not know what to do. I didn't know what to do. My mother didn't know what to do. None of my friends had dealt with anything like this. So I called a good friend of mine, actually a teacher of mine, and said, this has happened to my brother. Do you know what's happening to him? His partner happened to be in school of psychiatry, and she said, it sounds like he's in the middle of a psychotic episode.
What was he doing?
He was putting on 2 pairs of shoes, he was babbling, he was up, he hadn't slept. So my mother and I were taking shifts trying to stay up to see if he was okay. He was writing things on the wall with toothpaste. It was just literally watching someone deteriorate. So I was told to call the police. Actually, I was told to call the ambulance by the woman who was in psychiatry school, and I called the ambulance. And I made the mistake in telling the ambulance that my brother had just been released from prison. And they said, we don't pick up convicted felons. You have to call the police. And I battled with them for a few minutes. I said, I refuse to call the police. My brother has been tortured by the police in prison. And I ended up calling the police, and they came, and I had a long talk with them outside. I said, what do you plan on doing if my brother gets violent? I don't know if he will. I've never seen him like this. And they said, well, we'll just tase him. And I sent them home. And we eventually were able to get my brother in the hospital, but that was my introduction to my brother's mental illness. Well, I think it's important for people to understand that in each city, each county, each state, they decide how they're going to respond and relate to people with mental illness. In Los Angeles County, the decisions that have been made have largely been around investing resources into criminalizing people with mental illness. And what you've seen are mostly poor folks, mostly Black, mostly brown, mostly women who are domestic survivors, domestic abuse survivors, and people who are at the margins. Trans folks, street sex workers. Really, these are the folks who have been left to fend for themselves. And when you have a mental illness and you don't have family support, I think that was something that I always feel like I'm not doing enough. And that my family, if we just, if we could just do this more or this more. And watching this film, out of all of the subjects in the film, I realized that our family is doing a lot, and you could see the difference. You could see the difference around the outcomes for each of these folks, and it reminds me that we've really left it to family members to have to be the caregivers, and when we're not trained to do so, and when we have our own lives, and many of us either have to give up our lives or sacrifice our lives, and not because we don't want to, but we need more resources. We need more support. And I remember on one of my brother's last hospitalizations, me yelling at the social workers, what am I supposed to do when he comes home? What else is there for him? You all have to help us figure this out. And we've luckily been able to build really great relationships with the other doctor in the film, Dr. Dias. And my hope is that folks watch this film and come out the shadows for themselves and talk about their mental illness.